I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Good stuff. How long have you been doing this?
I think since last 70 days.
Oh, okay. Because you've got a lot of input. I've seen you've just kind of hassled people and they've just given in and said, yeah, yeah, we'll do it, we'll do it. But you've been speaking to some really interesting people, haven't you?
I'm trying to connect with the people who are living in different parts of the world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It works. It works. It's really interesting. I mean, obviously, when you messaged, I was a little bit unsure because obviously we don't know each other. And then I looked at your feed. And yeah, it looked really cool actually. Some of the interviews you were doing were really good.
Firstly, I want to thank you for giving your valuable time to me and allowing me to talk with you.
No, it's okay. You're welcome, man. You're welcome. No drama.
I
So,
saw, I came to know that you're a author, you're a writer, you're, you're the person who expresses your emotions and your thoughts, your feelings uh, in through your writings.
yeah, that's true. It's a great vehicle to express yourself, really, almost as a third person. So, what you'll know and what you'll see in the books is probably more of me than I even realised I was actually portraying myself. So if you talk to any author, any fictional author, there is there is a hell of a lot of themselves in those words.
To start with, I want to tell about you to my audience. Can you introduce yourself to my audience who are living
Yeah, sure.
in India? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure. My name is Graham McQuade. I'm an author, and I'm an author of. I've got two books under my belt, which I've got a couple of copies here of. So, New Gods and 15 Days in May. They are actually a trilogy. So they're the first two books of a trilogy. And what really kind of set me off on this road to writing was it was basically a way for me to put together a tribute, if you like, to my mother, who sadly died just before my first birthday. So you'll see written in the books there that that these books are obviously a tribute to her, and that the way I kind of coined it was that she obviously risked her life to breathe life into me, so I think it's only right that I do something to breathe life into her memory. That's pretty much the way I kind of and yeah, so the lead character in these books and indeed the trilogy is a woman called Margaret Gwendolyn Johnson, and that was my mother's maiden name. So
Okay.
sorry, back to the introduction. That's the that's what kind of got me on the road to writing. So I've probably been writing now for 6 years, 6 or 7 years, and um, and really you know obviously I've got a third book on the way, the third of the trilogy, and I've got other books kind of lined up. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay. So from 6 or 7 years, you're writing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, prior to that, I mean, I hold down a job. I'm working today. I work in commodities. I work with a global company. I work for a global company. They're based even in India. They're based all over. A company called ADM. Um, and obviously finding the time to actually write, which is obviously what we're talking about, is quite tough. Especially when you've got a fairly demanding job. And I guess that's going to be a lot. You'll hear that a lot from other authors that you speak to, or musicians or whatever. Yeah. So prior to prior to writing, I always feel as if I need to be doing something. And over the years, I've done marathons, mad, crazy events, blogged, quite a lot back when in the MySpace days. I was quite a prolific blogger. Um, but this feels nice actually. They're doing the fiction and doing it at your pace actually is quite nice. It's quite rewarding. Yeah. So that's
So what is your inspiration? What is your motivation that made you to explain your emotions and your thoughts in using writing?
well. I think the driving motivation originally was wanting to do a tribute to my mother, as I've said. That was the kind of driving force to get things moving. But since then, like it's obviously moved on a bit from there, and then obviously the story and how your mind evolves when you're actually creating stories. For example, if the first book, or even the second book, actually, when you start with an idea, what's interesting is how that idea manifests, and it's amazing to see actually. So if I look back at some of the drafts of my original work when I was putting the book together, to see how that book has actually developed over time is incredible. And so it really is amazing where your mind takes you. So now that is the driving force, I guess, behind actually continuing to write, because you never cease to amaze yourself in what you can actually get to and where your mind takes you. It's quite a journey. And so every time I actually link up, start to write, your mind is working overtime. You're generating things. So even after writing for half hour, 40 minutes, 2 hours or whatever, it's incredible what you actually look back and what you've actually put down. It's amazing. And that feeling alone is motivation. So,
Okay. Why you used a name called God in your first book?
well, basically, this is it's a swipe at corporations, and it's a swipe at man, really, because the new gods are a group of men that have become quite powerful over many years, and they call themselves the equals. So they're basically 13 men of equal standing, very powerful, very rich, very influential. And in the kind of opening salvo, every time these guys get together, they have been together in the book for many years, since the 18th century. So the group has evolved and changed over years, but you can only be invited into this very, very exclusive club. And they change continents. They're very powerful, influential people. And it's the 13th man, or the first man actually of the 13. It's his role to actually, every time these guys get together, to write a passage in keeping with the traditional of, rather than keep reading the original text of the passage that was read when the 13 got together originally, they changed the text. And in his text, the guy that's actually Fitzgerald, who's actually the head of the group in my book, he basically refers to them as new gods. He refers to them as a group as new gods. They're not believers in spiritual. They're not believers in fantasy. They're realists. And so the reference to new gods is about how he feels they are. He said they're the real gods. That's what he's saying. They're the real gods. They're the ones that change time. They're the ones that change destiny. They're the ones that effectively hold lives in their hands. So if you look at the reference to God and what that actual meaning means, and however it's overlaid, these guys have actually embraced that meaning, because they do change lives, they do steer continents, they do. Sorry, that's not the word. They influence life, so they refer to themselves as new.
So this
So
is a
that
frictional book.
correct, yeah. So it's fiction. It's all fiction, but I've kept. I didn't want it to be too much of a fantasy, because it's tagged as a science fiction, but it's multi-genre, if I'm honest. And the reason, what I try to do is I try to have places, real places within the stories. So, you know, when I research these places, they exist, and I research the cultures, and pretty much everything within the book exists. So if you wanted to do a tour of those books, you could go to pretty much every location, and they're there. So yeah, so I mean, it is a fiction. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's not. You know, I'd hate to think a lot of the stuff that goes on in this book were reality, but no, it's but it kind of, I think what kind of gives it the balance is that it's actually set in real time. New Gods is actually set in 2020. Now, bearing in mind, I wrote it 2 years ago, and it actually has a reference to a virus which cripples the whole of Europe. So now, obviously, I didn't know anything about the coronavirus when I wrote the book, but that was the basis of the book. That was the basis of the book. That kind of holds. That's the foundation, effectively, what drives Johnson and Wallace to go on this journey to try and discover what's going on and to stop an even greater pandemic. So yeah, it's very bizarrely in keeping with what we're actually seeing at the moment and what we're all suffering from at the moment. It's a different type of virus, by the way. That's the virus you don't want to see coming down your street. but you know, nevertheless, I mean, we don't want to see any virus going down your street, to be fair. But that's, yeah. So that's the basis for the book, effectively.
And what is the second book is about?
Well, now, interestingly, I actually wrote the second book first. The second book, New Gods, 15 Days in May, that one. This was actually written as a standalone, and this was the original tribute to my mum. So because the character looks like my mother, acts like my mother, and from what people tell me about her, pretty much carbon copies her, you know, with a kind of tenacity, a bravery, a humour. And so this was written as a standalone. But what actually happened when I wrote this book, and it's a big book, you know, it's over 100,000 words, and I needed to do more on the characters. So I needed to give the reader a vehicle so they could actually see where the characters all come together. And that's when New Gods was born. But this book here is more science fiction than anything else, and it starts with, well, if you read the book now, it starts with a discovery in South America, back in the early 60s, and then it fast forwards to Trenton, New Jersey, in I don't even know what the year is. It's sort of like in the 2000s, and it basically starts with a young man who is he's institutionalized. Actually, he's deemed as uncontrollable, or, you know, because he just has no sense of anything around him. And it starts with how he manifests into something that creates a situation for Wallace and Johnson to be invited in to try and unravel an element of what's actually going on, because a team are put together to try and work out what's happening with this guy, but there's elements there that the team, I don't want to give too much away, but the team can't actually fathom or work out. So they bring in Johnson and Wallace to actually come in and actually do their thing, really. And then it takes off from there. I mean, interestingly, Johnson and Wallace don't actually come into the book in the second book until the 10th chapter. And people that have read the book and said, I couldn't work out whether it was a trilogy because Johnson and Wallace weren't even in the book until sort of like 10 chapters in. I said, yeah, but what I needed to create there was I needed to create this this kind of sense that for the reader, now knowing Wallace and Johnson, to think that this would be an ideal opportunity for them to come in, because they would know the answers to a lot of the things that they're actually putting together, just from what you've learned from the characters in the first book. But, you know, it's been so well received. You know, when people have actually got into the book, they've loved it. You know, New Gods is actually receiving some incredible feedback. I mean, it's heartwarming, really. You know, where that people have actually taken the time to read the book in the first instance. But the responses I've had have been, couldn't have asked for anything better, to be fair. I mean, I genuinely could not have asked for anything better with regards to the responses that I've had. So, but 15 Days in May is like, sorry, back on 15 Days in May, again, it's quite a fast-paced journey, covering different parts of the world. I mean, Margaret, actually, when you first meet Margaret, she's in India. She's actually researching a site when they actually pull her in to come back to the States. But it takes place predominantly in North America and South America. That's the two areas where the actual story takes place. But no, it's got a good rhythm to it. I'm really happy with that as a book. You know, I've often, I mean, I did add a prelude to it, which was more to link the second book with the third of the trilogy.
Okay.
But no, other than that, it's absolutely fine. It's moving, and people are reading it, and people are feeding back, which is great.
What is the best compliment that you got for both the books?
Oh man, I mean, just a couple of bullets. Great read. Adrenaline rush. Love the characters. To be honest with you, if I pick it, you know, when you hear people sort of like say love the ending, there's loads and loads of lovely comments, but the one for me, I think, is the best one. I think is the one I kind of appreciate the most, is that people love the characters, they engage with the characters. So I think if I've got the characters wrong, the story would have fell down, because people wouldn't have necessarily been able to invest in the story if they didn't really like the characters. And I've had people come in and saying we love Margaret, and I can't even begin to imagine. I can't even begin to express how much that means to me, because the books, in a bizarre way, are a way of me introducing the world to my mother, who never had that opportunity to introduce to her world, because, you know, she lost her life at such a young age. So that is probably the greatest compliment I could get, really. And it means, well, it just means that I've done what I set out to do, and that was to introduce her. And bearing in mind, I never forget that these are a tribute to her. So that comment links all of that together quite beautifully.
Okay. May I know when she got expired?
Sorry?
When she died? In which year?
Oh, she died in 65.
Okay.
3 days before my first birthday, and she died of asthma, which is crazy, really, considering how we deal with asthma now. You know, a lot of children, a lot of adults, obviously, suffer from asthma, but they live with asthma. But obviously, back in the early 60s, you know, they didn't really know how to handle it. So over the years, as I've got older and a little bit more kind of sensible, I've done different things to raise asthma awareness, raise money for the asthma campaign. Really, again, because obviously that was the thing that kind of took my mother. It was tragic, really. I mean, you know, another couple of years, and she would have probably been able to cope with that attack, but it was just a couple of years too early, unfortunately, for Mum. But
Okay.
yeah.
So when you was 3, she died, right?
No, it was just before my first birthday.
Just before your first birthday.
Just before my first birthday, yeah.
But
Yeah.
you don't have her image in your mind, or you don't have her voice in your mind.
No. So basically, my family over the years have been really open with me, especially my dad. You know, they've been really open with me, and if I ever had any questions about my mum, no one ever hid anything from me. They told me all about her. So that's why I've been able to build the character that I have of her in my mind. And it helps actually, because a lot of people say that that I'm just like her. So I know my own character, and I also know what people say about her. So I was able to kind of put all this together, not just for the books, just to formulate a character in my own mind to help me through life normally. Because I don't know whether you've still got your parents around. I hope you have. But you know yourself that if you lose someone close to you, you want to be able to remember them in a certain way. And so if you've had the luxury of having your parents around, if you've been fortunate enough to have your parents around you till later life, then you know these characters, you know them well. I mean, I sadly lost my father 2 years ago, and I remember my dad as my dad because I remember my dad, because I grew up with him. I mean, I had 55 years with the man, but with my mother, obviously, I didn't have that time. So it's a slightly different way of actually formulating a memory. In my mind, my mum is always young because I can't imagine her being old. You know what I mean? She's always young. So, because that was the picture I formulated of her in my teens. And that is, and bearing in mind she died when I think it was when she was 23. So she was a very young woman. So she wasn't. You're probably not much far away from that sort of age yourself. But that's she was very, very young. So that's the image of her. Now it's strange to me thinking of my mum being like a young woman, given that I'm a lot older now. So, but that's.
So, without seeing her, without listening to her voice, you are trying to imagine what she is and how would she look and how would she talk, and you explain that your image that you created in your mind, you just projected that in your book, and you are creating effect with that image.
Correct. That's exactly right. So the character in the books is slightly older than the woman I remember, or the woman that I've put together. So she's kind of late 30s, early 40s in the book. But pretty much what you said is absolutely right. That person and that person that I've kind of created the memory of to a certain degree, with the help of others, obviously, is the character in the book. And the humour, the kind of tenacity, the the bravery. One thing I need to just say, and when I talk about bravery, I get asked this question from time to time when I refer to bravery. When my mum was thinking about having a child, the doctors basically said, don't have any children. If you have any children, it'll probably be too much for your body. But she was so brave because she wanted to have a child. So effectively, she had a child, and that ultimately could have contributed to the fact that she passed away. So,
Okay.
so
How much, yeah. How much time you took to complete this 1,000 words?
the to complete the books actually, the New Gods took probably around about 2 years. So that was the first one, but the original one took about 4 years because I had breaks. I wasn't really how was it? It was difficult to get into the kind of sort of like step of writing. You know what I mean? There was a lot of learning in writing the first book. So the first book took a long time from start to publish. But one of the things actually that took so to answer your question, now I could probably lay down sort of 500 to 1,000 words in less than a day. You know what I mean? If I've got the idea in my head, I can actually just fly. I mean, I know authors actually. I speak to authors that can do considerably more. They can actually they can write so much more. In a day. I mean, obviously my typing ability is probably less poorer than theirs. But no, I mean, so if I get 5 to sort of 1,000 good words down in a day, that's good for me, and that's good because obviously you have to. Well, for me, on both books, I've done like 4 drafts. So you finish the book, you go back, you do it again, and every draft you're adding more, and you're just building the story, and just kind of linking everything together a little bit better. But one of the things actually that now, I don't know, as you know, I'm an independent author, so I haven't got a publishing contract. I've done everything myself. But I did spend 6 months looking for a publisher, and that was such a waste of time. And I learned so much from that period. It was so disappointing to get rejection after rejection. I think I mailed, contacted, spoke to around about 80 different agents and publishers with the first book, and I don't know whether it was because it was multi-genre or it was, I don't know. I genuinely don't know how the books have been received, and the response I got from them was just bizarre. But yeah, so that was that took up a hell of a lot of time, and I think if anyone's watching this that's actually writing a book themselves and they're getting a bit kind of chewed up over the fact they can't get a publishing contact, I mean, screw it, don't worry about it. Do self-publish through Amazon? I mean, because there's no. I mean, if you ultimately you want to publish it, I mean, I'd love a publisher for one reason only, and I'll come on to that in a second. But if you're an independent author, well, be an independent author, release your book, then have your book as your currency to go and talk to publishers, because they'll be more receptive if you've got finished work. That's my experience. Now, I haven't pursued a publisher since doing the second book, which is effectively the first of the trilogy, because I'm not really. I didn't really want to waste any time. I wanted to get back on with a third book. But here's the thing where it's good to have a publisher or an agent, because they will take over the publicity of your book, so you don't have to worry about doing. This is lovely, actually. Talking to you, got no problem with. But where you do waste and spend a hell of a lot of time is, putting out sort of like mail shots, advertising to certain people. Do you know what I mean? It's quite it can be quite, especially when all you want to do is carry on writing, and then you're spending a hell of a lot of time doing that sort of stuff. A publishing house, an agent will take care of all of that for you. They'll do that for you. I mean, you will assist them with obviously the information, but they'll be the ones that will actually do that, and that's the bonus of actually having a publishing house or an agent working for you.
So, at last, what you want to say to the people who are watching this video?
Well, what do I want to say? I think just a little bit more of why I'm doing this. What the driving force. Obviously, you've asked the right questions and got me to answer those. So I think if the people, I think from this, so that ultimately to understand a bit more about me and why I'm doing this, and what my motivations are, and also that last bit. Although I didn't plan to say it, but that last bit actually, if any authors are out there and they're getting a bit downhearted, don't be. Your reward is in your work. Just get your work done and get it out there for people to see, and let the people be the ones that sort of like, well, get it to the people that you want to see it, really. And you can do that. There's plenty of vehicles out there for you to do that. And also, I guess, do work for you. Do it for yourself. Don't think about other people when you're putting your own work together, because the more of you that's in that work, the more unique it'll be, and the more it will resonate with people, because people will read something. If they want to read something fresh, they don't want to read something that's been made for them. They can get that from anywhere. So just be you and be as unique as you possibly can. But for me, I think, like to your first question, sorry, I'd like people just to basically see why I did it, what my motivations were, and hopefully pick up the book. I mean, you can get it free on Kindle, and just read through and just engage with the characters, and hopefully they'll be, you'll like them, like a lot of people have actually kind of connected with.
So, one last question. Is that possible for a human being to be himself if he's living in social world?
Ooh. Yes, actually. Well, this is actually, it takes me back to the very first point. When you actually write fiction, you'll be surprised just how much of yourself actually goes into that if you truly just cut off the rest of the world. Because what I find in my writing, now don't get me wrong, I've got a great family life, great work life. You know, I wouldn't change that for the world. But when you write, what you tend to do is you tend to cut off all of the outside influences, and what is going down is pure and simple coming from you. So I think you can be yourself actually. If I understand you correctly, I think you can be yourself when you're writing. You know, when you're actually putting stuff down. Although you're using fictional characters, I actually think there's a bit of me in three of the characters that exist within this book. So it's difficult to actually remove those elements because they are me. You know, so I think you can. Yeah, I think you can.
Okay. Thank you so much for giving your time and energy and your experience, your information about your writings, about your books.
Well,
Thank you so much. Can I put this video on my YouTube channel with your
you
permission?
can, of course you can, and I want to thank you as well because I think the work you're doing is great. And like I say, if anyone listens to this, they should listen to the rest of your feed because you've got some good stuff on there, man. You really have. So thank you for finding me.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
Okay, take
Keep
care.
writing. Yeah.
I will. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.